12-year-old Haven stood in the rain with nothing but a backpack and a blank birth certificate. 3 hours until she became property of the state. No family, no options, just one desperate plan. Walk into a motorcycle club and ask 30 strangers to become her fathers. What happened next changed everything, not just for her, but for every overlooked kid who came after. Haven Morelli had learned to read clocks the way other kids learned to read faces. Obsessively, desperately, always calculating how much time she had left before everything changed again. The courthouse hallway smelled like floor polish and stale coffee. She sat on a wooden bench that was too big for her, feet dangling above scuffed linoleum, watching people in business clothes rush past with folders tucked under their arms. None of them looked at her. She'd gotten used to that. Adults who looked through her like she was made of glass. Her caseworker, Ms. Waltz, stood 10 feet away talking on her cell phone. Haven couldn't hear the words, but she recognized the tone. Apologetic. Defeated. The same voice Ms. Waltz had used last week when she'd explained that the foster placement fell through. Code for, they changed their minds once they met you. Haven pulled her backpack closer. Everything she owned fit inside. Clothes that barely fit, a toothbrush, and one photograph of her mother from before everything fell apart. In the photo, her mom was smiling, holding infant Haven against her chest. Sometimes Haven looked at that picture and tried to remember what it felt like to be held like that. Mostly she just felt angry that she couldn't. Ms. Waltz ended the call and walked over, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. She sat down next to Haven but didn't look at her. Another bad sign. The group home in Fletcher is at capacity, Ms. Waltz said quietly. Emergency youth services can take you tonight, but it's temporary. Maybe a week, maybe 2. Haven nodded. She'd heard variations of this speech 14 times in 12 years. Different addresses, same message. You're a problem we're still trying to solve. What happens after 2 weeks? Ms. Waltz finally looked at her. There was genuine sadness in her eyes, which somehow made it worse. We keep looking. But Haven, I need you to understand. The interim guardianship expires this afternoon. Once that happens, you become a permanent ward of the state. That's a different process. Permanent. The word sat heavy in Haven's chest. Permanent meant no more emergency placements. No more hopeful phone calls. No more, we're working on it. Permanent meant invisible. How long do I have? Ms. Waltz checked her watch. The hearing is scheduled for mid-afternoon. Judge Hawk's docket is running behind, so maybe a few hours. A few hours to exist as someone who could still technically be claimed. After that, she'd just be a file number. Ms. Waltz stood up, smoothing her skirt. I need to file some paperwork. Stay here. Okay? Don't wander off. Haven watched her disappear down the corridor. The hallway had emptied out. Lunch hour, probably. She sat alone with the clock on the wall ticking forward, each second pulling her closer to a future she couldn't control. That's when she saw it. A bulletin board across from her bench, half hidden behind a trash can. Public notices, court dates, legal aid flyers, and pinned in the corner, slightly crumpled, a blank birth certificate amendment form. The kind used when someone needed to add or change parental information. Haven stood up slowly, like the form might vanish if she moved too fast. She crossed the hallway and pulled it free from the thumbtack. The paper felt official, important. There was a line for child's name, and another for legal guardian or parent. Her hands started shaking. She thought about her mother, the real one, not the ghost who'd promised to get clean and never did. There was one memory that surfaced sometimes, unbidden and sharp. Haven must have been 9 or 10. They were living in that apartment above the laundromat, the one that always smelled like detergent and cigarette smoke. Her mother had been sober for almost 3 months, the longest stretch Haven could remember. They'd gone for a walk, and her mom had pointed to a building on Ashland Street. See that garage? Storm Riders MC. Bunch of bikers, loud as hell but loyal. I helped one of their wives a while back. If something happens and I don't come back, you remember that place, okay? Haven had nodded, not really understanding. 2 weeks later, her mother disappeared for 6 days. When she came back, her eyes were empty again. But Haven remembered. She folded the form carefully and slipped it into her jacket pocket. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was insane. This was desperate. This was the only idea she had left. Ms. Waltz was still gone. The hallway was still empty. Haven looked at the clock one more time, calculating distance and minutes and the shrinking space between now and permanent. Then she walked toward the exit, pushed through the heavy glass doors, and stepped into the rain. Ashland Street was 5 blocks away. She'd never been inside the Storm Riders' garage, never met any of them, had no idea if they'd even remember her mother. But she had a blank form, a desperate plan, and nothing left to lose. The rain soaked through her jacket before she'd made it half a block. She kept walking. Behind her, the courthouse clock kept ticking. Ahead of her, everything was uncertain. But for the first time in 12 years, Haven Merelli was choosing her own direction. The Storm Riders' garage sat at the end of Ashland like a fortress made of corrugated metal and decades of oil stains. Haven stood across the street, rain dripping from her hair, watching the massive bay door that was rolled halfway open. She could hear classic rock playing inside, the occasional clang of metal on metal, voices laughing about something she couldn't make out. Her sneakers were completely soaked through. Water ran down the back of her neck. She'd been standing there for almost 5 minutes, trying to force her legs to move. Her mind raced through worst-case scenarios. They might not remember her mother. They might turn her away. This could be nothing more than a 12-year-old's last desperate grasp at hope. A truck rumbled past, splashing dirty water onto the sidewalk. Haven flinched, then took a breath. She was already soaked. She was already out of time. What did she have to lose besides the last shred of hope she was clinging to? She crossed the street and walked toward the open bay door. The garage opened into a cavern of chrome and concrete. Motorcycles in pieces lined the bays, tools glinted under fluorescent lights, and the air tasted like gasoline and possibility. A radio sat on a workbench blasting Lynyrd Skynyrd. Half a dozen men worked on bikes, their leather cuts draped over chairs or hanging from hooks on the wall. Some had gray in their beards. Others looked barely older than the high school kids Haven passed on her walk over. She stepped inside, and the conversation stopped. A man nearest to her, built like a linebacker, tattoos covering both arms, turned around with a wrench in his hand. "Help you, kid." Haven's throat went dry. All her rehearsals evaporated. She pulled the folded form from her pocket. It was damp now, edges soft from the rain. She held it up with both hands. "Write your name as my dad. Today's my court deadline. After that, no one gets to claim me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Someone turned the radio down. A man in the back bay stopped mid-swing with a hammer. Haven's pulse hammered in her ears. Then a voice came from the far corner. "What's your name?" Haven turned toward the sound. A man stepped forward from behind a lifted bike. Older, maybe 50, with gray streaking through his dark hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen enough to fill a library. His leather cut had a patch that read Warden beneath the club emblem. "Haven," she said. "Haven Merelli." Warden went still. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe, or memory surfacing from years back. "Merelli," he repeated slowly. "Your mother, Rebecca?" Haven nodded, not trusting her voice. Warden set down the rag he'd been holding and walked closer. He stopped a few feet away, studying her face like he was looking for proof of something. "How old are you?" 12. "Where's your mother?" "Gone. Been gone for 2 years. Drugs." Haven said it flatly, the way she'd learned to say it to caseworkers and therapists and anyone else who needed the abbreviated version of her life. Warden exhaled slowly. He saw Rebecca in Haven's eyes, that same stubborn tilt of the chin, the way she refused to beg even when she was drowning. He looked around the garage at the other men who were all watching now, then back at Haven. "Your mom helped my wife. 5 years ago. Leah had cancer bad. Rebecca drove her to appointments, sat through chemo with her, never asked for a dime. Then one day she just stopped showing up. That's what she does," Haven said quietly. Warden's jaw tightened. He looked down at the form in Haven's hands. "What's this deadline you're talking about?" Haven explained it all. The interim guardianship expiring, the caseworker's defeated phone call, the group home at capacity, the permanent ward status waiting for her in a few hours. She kept her voice steady, factual, like she was giving a report instead of describing her entire future dissolving. When she finished, Warden turned to the other men. "Table meeting. Now." The garage transformed. Men dropped tools, grabbed chairs, formed a rough circle near the workbench. Haven stood awkwardly to the side until Warden gestured for her to sit on an overturned crate. Someone handed her a can of Coke. Another guy draped a shop towel over her shoulders. It smelled like oil, but it was warm. "This is Haven," Warden said to the group. "Her mother helped Leah through the worst year of our lives. Kids got nobody and the state's about to swallow her whole. She came here asking for help." A younger guy with a shaved head leaned forward. "What kind of help? Foster situation?" "More than that," Warden said. He looked at Haven. "Show them." Haven held up the form again, her hands steadier now. "I need a legal guardian by this afternoon or I disappear into the system permanently. I don't have family. I don't have options. I'm asking you to sign this." A man with a thick beard and a patch that read Sledge whistled low. "That's not a small ask, kid." "I know," Haven said. "But my mom said you were loyal. She said if she ever didn't come back, I should remember this place." The men exchanged glances. Someone muttered something about liability. Another mentioned the court system and bureaucracy. But Warden held up a hand. "Leah's alive because Rebecca Morelli gave a damn when nobody else did. I don't forget that. And I'm not about to let her daughter get lost in the system because it's complicated." He looked around the circle. "We vote. All in favor of helping this kid? Raise your hand." Every hand went up. Warden nodded. "Then we're all showing up." Haven blinked. "All? If one name on that form isn't enough, we'll give them 30. Let them argue with that." Within an hour, the garage had transformed into a makeshift legal war room. Phones came out. Calls were made to a lawyer the club kept on retainer, a woman named Sarah Voss who specialized in messy cases. She asked a dozen rapid-fire questions, then said she'd meet them at the courthouse. Papers were printed. Men changed into cleaner shirts, though most kept their cuts on. This wasn't about looking respectable. This was about showing up as exactly who they were. Haven sat on the workbench eating a slice of pizza someone had ordered, watching these strangers mobilize around her like she was worth saving. Warden crouched down in front of her. "You understand this might not work, right? Judge could say no. System could fight us." "I know," Haven said. "But you showed up. Nobody's done that before." Warden's expression softened. "Then let's go make some noise." They walked out into the rain together, 30 patched members and one 12-year-old girl carrying a form that was about to rewrite the rules. Judge Sarah Hawk had presided over family court for nearly 2 decades. She'd seen parents lose children to addiction, children testify against abusers, grandparents fight for custody of grandkids they barely knew. She thought she'd seen every variation of broken families trying to piece themselves back together. Then her bailiff knocked on her chamber door with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. "Your Honor, there's a situation." She followed him into the hallway and stopped dead. 30 men in motorcycle cuts lined the corridor in 2 neat rows, standing at parade rest like soldiers waiting for orders. Rain dripped from their jackets onto the polished floor. In the center of them stood a small girl with soaked sneakers and a backpack that looked like it had seen better years. Ms. Waltz was already there, phone pressed to her ear, talking rapidly to someone about protocols and emergency procedures. Her face had gone pale. Judge Hawk walked slowly down the line, meeting eyes, assessing. They stood quietly, respectfully, dangerous men choosing discipline over chaos. But their presence filled the entire hallway like thunder before a storm. She stopped in front of the girl. "What's your name?" "Haven Morelli, Your Honor." "And these men? They're here for me." Judge Hawk looked at the man standing closest to Haven, older, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone used to command. "Explain." Warden stepped forward. "Trace McCall, Your Honor, President of the Storm Riders MC. We're here to file for guardianship." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Guardianship requires a petition, a home study, background checks." "We have a lawyer en route with preliminary paperwork," Warden interrupted politely but firmly. "And we're not asking for one guardian. We're asking for collective custody. All 30 of us." Ms. Waltz lowered her phone. "That's not legally possible." "Maybe not common," Warden said. "But we couldn't find anything saying it's illegal either." Judge Hawk studied him for a long moment, then looked back at Haven. The girl's chin was up, her jaw set with determination that seemed too old for her face. She'd seen that look before, on kids who'd learned that fighting was the only way to survive. Emergency hearing, the judge said finally. Courtroom C. 10 minutes. The courtroom filled quickly. The storm riders took up 3 full rows of benches. Sarah Voss arrived breathless with a briefcase full of hastily printed documents. Ms. Waltz sat at the opposing table looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. Haven sat between Warden and Sarah, her hands folded in her lap. Judge Hawk took the bench and spent several minutes reviewing the papers Sarah had filed. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of documents and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. Finally, she looked up. Mr. McCall, help me understand what you're proposing. Joint custody typically involves 2 parents. You're suggesting 30 legal guardians for 1 child. Yes, Your Honor. That's unprecedented. So is a 12-year-old walking into a garage in the rain with a blank birth certificate and 3 hours before the state makes her disappear. The judge's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Why you? Why this club? Warden explained about Rebecca Morelli, about Leah's cancer, about debts that couldn't be measured in dollars. He spoke plainly, without embellishment, the way a man speaks when he knows his word is the only currency that matters. We've got our scars, he said, but we don't abandon people. We take care of our own. And Haven's mother earned that protection 5 years ago. Judge Hawk turned to Ms. Waltz. What's the state's position? Ms. Waltz stood reluctantly. Your Honor, while I appreciate the sentiment here, we have protocols for a reason. Background checks, home evaluations, stability assessments, these things take time. We can't just hand over custody to bikers. Warden's voice was quiet but sharp. Say what you mean. Ms. Waltz flushed. To anyone without proper vetting. We've got veterans, business owners, a retired teacher, a registered nurse, clean records, steady work, and a clubhouse older than most marriages. What we don't have is a piece of paper that says we're suitable parents. He paused. But Haven doesn't have time for paperwork. Judge Hawk leaned back in her chair. Haven, would you approach the bench? Haven stood up, her legs shaky. She walked forward until she stood directly in front of the judge's elevated desk. Up close, Judge Hawk looked tired but not unkind. Tell me why you went to them, the judge said quietly. Haven swallowed. Because my mom said they were loyal, and because I've been in 14 different places and nobody ever chose me, they just got assigned. I'm tired of being someone's obligation. And you think 30 bikers choosing you is better? They didn't have to show up, Haven said, her voice stronger now. Ms. Waltz was ready to send me to emergency youth services. The system was ready to file me away. But they're here. All of them. That's more than anyone else has ever done. The courtroom was so quiet Haven could hear her own heartbeat. Judge Hawk looked at the rows of patched members, at the girl with soaked hair and defiant eyes, at the caseworker who knew exactly how this story usually ended. I'm calling a recess, she said. 1 hour. Ms. Waltz, contact Child Welfare Legal. Mr. McCall, your lawyer, and I need to have a very serious conversation about how this would actually work. She stood, and everyone rose with her. As she walked toward her chambers, she paused and looked back at Haven. You're brave, she said simply. Let's see if we can match that. The door closed behind her, and 30 men released the breath they'd been holding. Judge Hawk returned after 2 recesses and 3 heated phone calls with Child Welfare Administration. She looked exhausted but resolute as she took the bench for the final time that afternoon. This court grants conditional community custody to the Storm Riders Motorcycle Club, collectively, for the minor Haven Morelli. This arrangement comes with oversight, reviews, home studies, and advocate watching every step. One misstep and it ends. She looked directly at Haven. You'll have 30 legal guardians listed on your custody papers. That's never been done before. Don't make me regret it. Haven couldn't speak. For 12 years, she'd been a name on forms, a problem to solve, a child who took up space. Now she was someone's daughter. 30 someone's. She could only nod as tears she'd been holding back for hours finally spilled over. The clubhouse that night was louder than Haven had ever heard anything in her life. Music poured from speakers. Men clapped each other on the back. And someone hung a hand-painted banner that read, Welcome Home Haven, in uneven letters. Mama Leah, Warden's wife, The woman Haven's mother had helped through chemotherapy, pulled Haven into a hug that smelled like lavender and felt like safety. "You're ours now," Leah whispered. "Every single one of us." The first year taught Haven that family came with friction and growth in equal measure. She rotated between households on a schedule Leah managed with the precision of a military operation. Warden and Leah taught her that dinner happened together and homework wasn't optional. Diesel, who'd left teaching for engine repair, tutored her at his kitchen table while Katz wove figure eights around chair legs. Thursday and Friday with Sledge and his partner Maria, who taught Haven how to cook and didn't flinch when Haven broke down crying over nothing during her second week there. Saturday with Rev, the club's road captain, who had a daughter in college and understood that 12-year-old girls needed space to be angry sometimes. Sunday was community day at the clubhouse. Haven helped with maintenance, learned to change oil, rebuilt her first carburetor under Diesel's patient guidance. The men treated her like a rookie, no special treatment but infinite patience. When she messed up, they showed her how to fix it. When she succeeded, they celebrated like she'd won a championship. School was harder. The first day, Haven walked into 7th grade as the girl with 30 biker dads, and the whispers followed her down every hallway. Some kids made jokes. Others kept their distance like poverty and motorcycles might be contagious. But when Brad Morrison shoved her locker shut on her hand during lunch, calling her trailer trash, he found himself facing 5 Storm Riders members at the parent-teacher conference that afternoon. No threats, no raised voices, just 5 men who understood the power of presence. They simply sat in tiny classroom chairs, arms crossed, while Brad's parents explained that their son was just joking around. Warden leaned forward slowly. "Funny thing about jokes, they're only funny if everyone's laughing." Haven wasn't laughing. "So here's how this works. Your son apologizes, means it, and leaves her alone. Or every single parent-teacher event, every school function, every moment where parents show up, we'll be there. All of us. We clear." Brad apologized the next day. He never bothered her again. By 8th grade, Haven had found her rhythm. She made honor roll, joined the debate team, and discovered she was good at arguing, really good. Diesel joked that she'd learned from the best, watching club votes every Sunday. When Haven announced she wanted to study law, nobody seemed surprised. High school brought new challenges. There was the boyfriend situation. A sweet kid named Joshua who made it exactly 3 dates before 5 patched members showed up at the diner where they were having milkshakes, casually mentioning they were in the neighborhood. Joshua handled it well, even laughed about it later, but Haven was mortified. "You can't do that," she'd shouted at Warden that night. "We absolutely can," he'd replied calmly. "You want privacy? Earn our trust first." They fought about curfews, about the tattoo she wanted at 16, about whether she needed an escort to prom. But through every argument, every slammed door, every moment where Haven tested the limits to see if they'd give up, they never did. They attended every debate tournament, front row, asking questions like they'd been preparing all week. They funded her college application fees. When she got her driver's license, Rev handed her the keys to a refurbished bike they built together and said, "You break it, you fix it." Senior year, Haven stood at the starting line of the first annual Haven's Guardians charity ride, an event the club created to raise money for legal orphans and systemic reform. 200 motorcycles lined the street. Local news cameras captured her speech. "I was 12 years old with 3 hours and a blank piece of paper," Haven said into the microphone, her voice steady. "I walked into a garage and asked strangers to rewrite the definition of family. They said yes, not because they had to, but because loyalty meant something. This ride is for every kid who thinks nobody's coming. We're coming. All of us." The roar of 200 engines drowned out everything else. College applications came next. Haven wrote her entrance essay about collective guardianship models and their viability for at-risk youth. She got accepted to 3 universities with scholarships. The club funded the rest without hesitation. Graduation day, Haven walked across the stage in cap and gown, diploma in hand, while 30 men in matching shirts stood in the front row. The shirts had her senior photo on the back above the words, "Haven's Dads." At the clubhouse celebration afterward, Haven stood on a chair and looked around at the family she'd fought for and who'd fought for her. "You didn't just save me," she said. "You proved that family isn't about who you're born to, It's about who chooses you back. Thank you for showing up. Warden raised his beer. To Haven, our daughter, our legacy, our proof that love doesn't need permission. 30 voices echoed the toast. Haven Morelli had walked into that garage with desperation and a blank form. She walked out carrying proof that chosen family could be stronger than blood. Not once, 30 times. Haven didn't just get adopted that day, she sparked a movement. Her story asks us all, what if family isn't about finding the perfect home, but about building one together? If the story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Give it a like, subscribe, and join us on Embrace the Journey for more stories that prove love has no limits. See you in our next video.